Good evening from Bali. I am Kat Kabira, and what I would love to talk to you about today is the importance of turning our mistakes into learning experiences. So what inspired me to actually talk about this is that I am really good at making mistakes. And in the past, that used to make me cringe so much and also would bring up a lot of shame. And you know how shame is. It's immobilizing. It can feel like this tight heat that's wrapping around your body. You literally can't move. You don't want to look at anyone. You feel like you're dying inside, and you actually believe that you truly have no place on this earth. Like when shame runs through our body, it's a pretty intense spell to break. And I definitely am someone who identifies well with a more perfectionist personality trait. And so it took me a long time to be comfortable with making mistakes and actually realizing that they never were mistakes anyway. I know I'm kind of talking like Instagram quotes, so but just stay with me, okay? So I was classically trained on the piano. And I gave it up, like it just didn't get me off. And when I was in my 20s, and when I was 20 actually, I started to study a little bit of jazz improv. And what I loved about it is that, at least from how I interpreted jazz improv, is that it's like you'll get a melody, which to me is just like this, like the core of the song, and that's what you're going to base like all of your improv, all of your jamming around. But at some point, there's going to be like a mistake that gets made, like a note that wasn't meant to be played, like whoops. And so, I know like in the rest of my life, when that one note comes, I'm like, oh, fuck. And I just cringe and I almost stop, and I'm like, oh, let's redo it. I want to do it perfectly. Let's do a do-over. But the thing is like with music, like you just keep playing. So suddenly you're like, oh, there's the mistake. And there's the mistake. And there's the mistake. And let's keep playing that. And let's add on to it. And then suddenly the mistake just like takes some really cool turns. And suddenly it brings you into this cool space in the song that you didn't know existed. And that happens to me like when I'm doing, I guess I would say like my way of playing, whether it's the piano or like movement, it's a lot of improv. And that's where I discover, and even energy work, right? Because it's about being present and responding. It's not about like, I'm going to, make a prescription or a plan ahead of time and then try to follow that perfectly. That is when we get really like stuffed up, and I'm not, there's a time and place for everything, but in terms of like allowing spirit to run through us, and that willingness to be in direct contact with life, we have to drop that plan. Like that's a shield, right? Like for those of us who are really good at planning, like we kind of know like, there's one side to be organized, which is good, but there's another side to be like a control planner, which is more based out of fear. So it's like when we can actually allow ourselves to just show up as we are and follow the flow, that's when the magic happens. So you may or may not know, I had eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating for a really, really, really long time. And I naturally, as I healed from it, I started to help. I attracted people who had eating disorders, and that became one of my strengths, is just to show you, yes, you can live beyond this. And learning to turn any fallback or relapse into a learning moment was actually like the main key. So for my students who, are bulimic, It's not like, oh, I've just stopped binging, I've just stopped purging, or my students who are anorexic. It's like, oh, I just eat like a normal person all the time now. Like, no, and those of us who have other addictions, because there's so many ways to be an addict, it's never straight and narrow as much as we want to. There's so many undercurrents that are going to pull us in so many different directions. So what can really harm us in the moment is that in that moment of mistake or relapse, whatever it may be, immediately we'll be like, I fucked up. And we'll get really mad at ourselves. Like, we'll kick ourselves while we're down. We'll consider like how horrible we are, and we'll just like focus on how bad we are, right? And we're just such, like, we can be so highly critical. And there is no way that we're going to grow from that kind of attitude, right? And remember that we are human beings. And especially for those of us who are more on, like, I guess we could call like a spiritual path, usually it attracts people who are really hard on themselves, where it's like there's just such a high standard where it's like, but we're humans, like we're kind of like screwed in some ways. Like, there's a lot of stuff to deal with within our humanness. How do we meet our humanness? The fact that we're emotional, that we like carry all this trauma, that we can be awkward, that we're terrified. None of this is bad. Can we see our lovability in all this, right? And as a side note, like our tendency, not everyone, but a lot of us will be, I'm gonna notice where my faults are. I'm not going to look at like where I'm a badass. I'm not going to look at my strengths. Think about when you look in the mirror. How many of you out there are like, damn, I look good, right? Like, or are you honing in on this like one little area of your body that you're just convinced is terrible, right? Or like how good at you are taking, compliments, when someone says something like, yeah, damn straight I'm like that. Thank you. Or are you like, let me give that one back to you. I'm not even going to take that one in. So what is so relieving is when we're just like, I am a human and I'm allowed, I'm going to make mistakes. Not even allowed. I will make mistakes. Are they even mistakes? But things are going to happen that are quite unexpected and surprising. And how do I get to play with this? How do I get to grow? Where's that little like, I didn't know that note was going to come. So that instead of our world falling apart internally and really being reactionary, in some way, where we can sit and just really look at like, that's interesting. Like, all the energy conspired for that to happen. What was going on underneath? And when I look back at now I'm so old now, so I can I have many decades now. I can't wait to get older if it happens. But when we look back at previous mistakes, think about how those were the best teachers. Like, I think about what my entire life work is based on, and it's actually based on all of those mistakes. So the song of my life, I thought it was going to be this one little song. But instead, all these other little notes came in and like beats and refrains and some instruments that I didn't even know existed. And that has really taken me on a different journey. And it's taught me, it's given me wisdom. So the next time you make a mistake, which will be, quite a few every single day, whether it's like a small mistake where it's like, I don't know, like I drop glasses a lot. Or even like, it's really wonderful when you can actually just say, okay, I totally was an asshole to someone and I hurt their feelings. And I'm going to just say I'm sorry. And it's just like, it's just so nice when we can just own that. And the beautiful thing, side note again, about forgiveness is that, I don't know about you, but it's really easy for me to forgive if someone just is like, yeah, I'm like authentically, sincerely, like, I really did this and I'm really sorry. And then it's like, yeah, that was you in your place at that time. And, you know, it like suddenly I see their side as well. You know, like there actually is this beautiful, like, I'm not saying say you're sorry when it's not yours to be sorry about. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. But when it's your real sorry, like, just to be like, yeah, like, and I'm not talking about like the fake sorries where you're like, whoops, like, you know, I just like knocked into somebody, sorry. Not those, but yeah, I hurt your feelings. I totally acknowledge it. I'm really sorry. You know, that just like helps our heart settle in. So whether you hurt someone's feelings or whether you break a glass or you're just clumsy or, you know, sometimes you're just not feeling the way you want to feel, it's like, that's cool, right? So, or if you relapse, you know, it's going to happen. You know, we are in a much more intense time in this world, and it's bringing up a lot of anxiety, it's bringing up a lot of fear, it's bringing up a lot of feelings, and almost like some of our old coping mechanisms don't work anymore. And so there comes that question of, how do I get to meet myself now? You know, there is a newness that's emerging for all of us, and how can I meet myself right now? So if you're struggling, instead of just seeing the struggle, you know, along with how can I meet myself, how can I be tender with myself, where's the learning experience? And I'm just going to give you one little practical on that, just in case you're like, give me a practical, Kat. And I'm just going to talk about binging on food. So let's say you like come home and let's say you've actually been really good at just eating what your body wants, you know, and you're not finding that you're emotionally eating. And then one night you're like, fuck, you know, wow, I just ate like, you know, 3 or 4 times the amount that I was going to eat, you know, and immediately your mind will go to, I screwed up, I don't have enough self-control, like I need to get back on a stricter diet. And sometimes when we look underneath, and I know I've talked about this in other videos, but there's usually a reason underneath why we're doing things. And sometimes it's just like, wow, I'm really uncomfortable with certain feelings that I don't want to feel, and that's why I'm eating. Or, oh shit, there's all this stuff that I need to say, but I don't want to say it. I'm going to just start to eat to like kind of shove it all down. So if we can look at that there's a deeper truth that wants to emerge, then suddenly it's like you can turn that, oh, I just binged and now I need to go on a diet, which never solves anything. But more, how can I have integrity with myself? You know, what's my real truth? And I recognize in those moments when I want to binge, there's a part of me that's trying to go away from myself because it's so uncomfortable. There's some pain there. And actually, I want to find a way to move towards myself. And that really is the medicine of how much can we stay with ourselves, you know, throughout the day. And it is kind of wired into our human matrix to be very external and focused on the world around us and kind of like, oh, you know, if I keep making these choices and if I keep doing this, like everything's going to be okay, without recognizing that as long as we're in these bodies, you know, there's going to be waves, there's going to be loss, there's going to be waves, there's going to be loss, there's going to be surprises, there's going to be things that we don't want. And also that we can't, like, we're in these multidimensional bodies that are constantly shifting and changing. Like, we don't get to control our moods. You know, we can find like a deeper bliss, peace, and contentment underneath, but there's still going to be moods that move through our system like clouds. We don't get to control other people. And so how can we start to find that rest within ourselves instead of looking at how can I manipulate everything on the outside in order for me to rest? It's more like, can I start to claim that rest? And a really simple thing is that I practice that's more just like, not like a seated meditation practice or a movement practice, but just more as I'm leaving the house and whatever I'm doing, I really watch, am I in everyone else's energy field, or am I really with myself? And not like so self-absorbed where I don't recognize that other human beings exist. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, I totally am aware of the world around me, but I haven't left myself. It's like I've got my own back. And suddenly, just by choosing to always stay with oneself, the experience of life changes. Like, here I am. Being able to stay with oneself changes how we perceive and experience life. Because then we realize, here I am, moment to moment. Because a lot of the pain that we go through is because we've left ourselves. Think about relationships, like it's very common for one or both sides to just give themselves up in relationship. There's a reason why codependency is like a tagline. But even that heartbreak of when like a marriage ends or any sort of relationship ends is just like a renegotiation of self and who am I, right? And it's, in a way, there's no way that we can't affect or influence one another. It's like if you walk into a room, even if you're someone with great boundaries, there's still going to be a vibe there that influences you, or that sparks you in some way. Like, there's no way that we came here as humans to be touched by life, not run away, not constantly manage. And how can we start to fall into life? How can we meet life with love, like with real love? And so the gem here is that we don't want to miss ourselves. Like, if we want real love, we don't give ourselves up. We don't dismiss ourselves. And I'm not just talking romantic love, I'm talking all love. Everything is love. So how do you still get to exist? How do you still get to exist? How do you make sure that you're not being dismissed or missed in the process? And also not dismissing others, right? We all belong. So these are some notes for you to consider when the next time you make your next playful, creative, improv, surprise mistake, knowing that there's always like this golden gem underneath, and immediately let yourself go to, what's there for me? What's there for me? And then the other piece, which is, what would it be like to always stay with yourself, to never leave yourself, to never dismiss yourself? I hope you have a very wonderful evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you very, very soon.